Hi, I'm Elaine Harding. Welcome to Fun Friday at stampwithelaine.com. Today I'm going to show you how to use this gilding embellishment. You can find it on pages 32 to 34 of the new January to June 2021 mini catalogue. These are the papers from the suite. They are painted by an artist and then reproduced. I think it's in oils or acrylic. And that's one side, and this is the other side. They're 12 by 12 inch sheets. I've just cut these down to 6 by 6. Also in the suite are these golden acetate sheets. They're printed and they actually coordinate with the papers. I've cut off a 4-inch strip here to use on a card when I did a sneak peek for you. So this is the remainder of it, and it sort of overlays over the designer series paper. You can use the back of it, which will be in silver. Then obviously if you're using this side, it won't match up with the papers here. And also if you need to take off the protective film at the back here and remove that when you come to using it. This one, there are 3 sheets in the pack. This one overlays this pattern of designer series paper. This one is just random patterns, so you can use either side, but just remember to take off this film when you come to using it. This video is a 101 on how to do the gilding. There are 5 ways you can do the gilding: stenciling, embossing, masking, how to use adhesive sheets or tear and tape, and also 2 ways of stamping to apply your gilding. You need Versamark ink and a heat and stick powder. So you use the Versamark ink first, then sprinkle it with the heat and stick powder, and you need a heat tool. If you hold your paper perpendicularly, you can see the heat and stick powder melting, and you need to work quickly because once it dries, it will lose its tackiness and the gilding won't stick to it. By holding it perpendicularly, I mean upright like this, and as you work your way down the paper, you can see it turning clear, much better than if you're laying it flat. Another type of glue you can use is this Tombow one. You have to allow it to dry and get tacky like a post-it note before you can use it. It's no good using the fine tip glue pen because that dries clear and it isn't sticky. The other thing to remember is that you need to work in a draft-free room. The slightest coughing or sneezing, it will just disperse your gilding everywhere. It's also best to decant your gilding in a biscuit tin or big container anyway, something that's large enough so that you can stick your cardstock in. Also, a word of caution: when you're opening the tin, open it gently, because if you open it too hard, it will cause a draft and all your flakes will fly out as well. The other thing that's handy is also a stenciling brush. I've got a size 8 and a size 10, or you can use these watercolour correction brushes. They're hard with a flat head, like so. It doesn't matter what. Something with fairly hard bristles is good. I tried it with stenciling first. I put it on my Stamparatus so that the cardstock wouldn't move, and you just press your ink pad onto the stencil so that the ink would go through the apertures. But I found that because the stencil was so large, when I came to putting the heat and stick powder on, it didn't stay tacky enough, and I got dry patches here. So it wasn't frightfully satisfactory. And also, if the patterns are too intricate, it doesn't really show either. Some of the definition is lost. So then I worked on a simpler pattern with less detail and on a smaller area, and that worked fine. And this one also worked quite well. The other way is to do masking. So I got some post-it notes, cut out some shapes, and I just masked one side and applied ink, Versamark ink on that, and heat and stick powder to get that effect. And I did the same with this strip here, so I put 2 post-it notes there to mask it to get that strip here. Next, you can also die cut letters and gild the letters like I've done here. In order to do that, when you're cutting your adhesive sheet, you need to cover both the front and the back of the cardstock, and you cut a second piece with just the back of the cardstock with the adhesive sheet, so you can layer that one on top of that, and it will give your letter a bit of depth. So that's using adhesive sheets and dies. So this was also using die cutting. I cut a 3 by 3 inch, well, it's the size of this die, a 3 inch by 3 inch piece of cardstock, and adhered it with adhesive sheet on the back, so it will cut out this detail here. Then I cut another piece of cardstock that was the same size but probably just slightly smaller, covered with adhesive sheet on one side, and I gilded the whole plain piece, which is underneath here, and then removed the backing sheet on the die cut here and adhered it to the top, on top of the gilded piece. I hope that makes sense. So that's another way of using an adhesive sheet. Now this is also using an adhesive sheet, so I just cut an adhesive sheet like that, and I use much larger bits of leaf, and it comes up with that textured look. I love it. This one is just with your simple tear and tape. You just make a pattern. So that's the last one to do down here. Bring in my tin of flakes. Remember to be gentle when you open it so it doesn't fly everywhere. And I'm just going to pop some on here, press it down like so into the tin, and then use a brush to take off the excess. And there's the result. Once you've got your gilding flakes ready to apply, make sure that all your ink pads are closed, your fingers and hands are dry, and there's no danger of anything of the gilding sticking to your ink pads, because if it does, it will be very difficult to clean. Next we come to stamping. So I used a background stamp, and these are the textured essential stamps, and that turned out very well, except for this one, because it's such fine detail. First time I did it, I just rubbed it and I didn't use a stenciling brush. The second time I did it, I used a stenciling brush and took off as much of the gilding as I could, and then you can see a bit of the detail more clearly in this one. I also got a good result with this one. See how the stamps are simpler, there's no pattern to it, so that worked better. And that's the last one. This one was using the Tasteful Texture stamp set, and that came out really well as well, and that's again very fine, and I used this brush to take off as much of the gold leafing as I could so that it would reveal the fine detail on that. I'll also cover the dry embossing one. This one I use the Seashells 3D, just run a Versamark ink pad over it, heat and stick powder, and then rubbed gilding over it. And it gives that wispy look of gilding on the raised portions of the embossing. I also embossed the painted texture 3D embossing folder, which goes with this suite. This is the stamp set in the suite called Art Gallery, and this is stamping again, so it's triple stamping. I stamped the largest image in the lightest ink, the accent colour in the darker ink, and then lastly for the flower centre I stamped that in Versamark, sprinkled with heat and stick powder, and then put the gilding on. This was the gilding I did for the sneak peek, so that this one I only stamped it twice, and I stamped the second accent colour in Versamark and then heat and stick powder, so the gilding is more pronounced on this one than it is on that. So we're going to be making this one. The inks I'm using are Blushing Bride, Rococo Rose, Versamark, the heat and stick powder and a heat tool, the Art Gallery bundle. This is the one that will be stamped in the palest colour in Blushing Bride. This one will be stamped in Rococo Rose, and this one will be stamped in Versamark and heat and stick powder. So the card base is Rococo Rose. That's 8 1/4 by 5 7/8, 21 centimeters by 14.85, and folded in half. Then for the Rococo Rose layer on top and the Whisper White one for inside, these are both cut at 5 1/2 by 3 3/4 inches, so that's 14 centimeters by 9.5 centimeters. These are the free celebration papers you can get with a £45 purchase, excluding shipping and handling. It's available in 4 colours. That's the reverse, that's the front, and there are 48 sheets in the pack. They're called Oh So Ombre. I cut a piece with the second largest stitch nested label dies, textured 3D embossing folder, and a piece of Whisper White scrap to stamp the flower and the leaf and the sentiment. So to start with, we're going to emboss the Rococo Rose layer, and for that you need the basic platform and the grey platform 4, and I'll emboss that off camera and I'll be back. I'm going to get my tin ready, the heat emboss powder ready, drag the ink pad over the cardstock, close the ink pad, make sure my hands aren't sticky, sprinkle it with embossing powder, tap it off, do the other side, tap it off, shut that so it won't blow away. Now, I hope you can see I'm going to hold my paper upright like that. Okay, oops. You have to work fairly quickly. Don't dwell on any one place. As soon as it melts, move on to another part. Press that down. I'll take the stenciling brush and just brush it off. take off any residue on your hands. And that also helps clean the brush as well. Gently replace the lid. You're going to need it again for the centre of the flower. Glue that to my card front. Stamp this multi-floral image in the corner of the inside of the card. Do that to the inside. This is Blushing Bride and that's Rococo Rose, so I'm going to stamp the large image in Rococo Rose. The accent colour in Rococo Rose, I meant Blushing Bride there. It's pretty easy to line up. Stamp the stem in Granny Apple Green. Best wishes. I'll die cut those first before I do the gilding. I'm going to make sure I've got my tin of powder gilding flakes and heat and stick powder at the ready. Stamp the flower in Versamark. Make sure my ink pads are closed. Sprinkle heat and stick powder over it. Stamp away because that's wet with Versamark. And then pop that in my tin and lay it over the gilding. Press it into the gilding. Take off some of the excess with my fingers and then use a brush to brush off the rest. Pop some dimensionals on the back of the flower. Pop glue on that, glue this to the card front. Some adhesive on here. Much too much adhesive. Let's scrape some of that off. Pop it on there. Remove the backing from the dimensionals and lay that on top. And last thing to do is also remove the backing tape from the dimensionals on the sentiment. Pop that there. I hope you've enjoyed today's 101 on gilding. I covered lots of ways that you can apply gilding through stenciling, embossing, masking with adhesive sheets or tear and tape, and simply by stamping. Thanks for joining me today. All the links to the supplies are listed below, and if you bought this bundle then you can earn these gorgeous papers for free. Thanks for watching. Bye.